Photorealism refers to the method of taking photographs and precisely replicating them onto canvas by an artist. One artist, Chuck Close, took photorealism to another level with his endless portraits using this method. In his prime years, however, of art creation, he sustained a serious brain injury. This impaired him and left a lasting impression on his art after he endured this severe condition. Interest in his art grows with time, but his story surpasses the brilliance of his artwork. He was born in 1940 in Washington and attended the University of Washington in Seattle. After getting his Bachelor of Art degree, he studied at Yale and gained his graduate degree. Now, this time in Yale, this is when he really learned about what he wanted to do with his art and really refined exactly what he wanted to do. After going to Yale and graduating, he taught at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst and the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Now, during this time at Amherst in New York, he experimented with abstract expressionism, which didn't necessarily work out for him. He had to refine what he wanted to do, and he had to essentially adapt into what he is today. And it was at that time, at those schools, when he was teaching, when he really refined into the artist that he is today. And at the time, process art was very popular. So that had an effect on Close. He tried to mimic that. He also ironed out a new method with his work, the big nude. Now, the big nude, I'll pull up on the screen here. This piece was done in his typical fashion, except the fact that it's not a self-portrait, it's a full body person, full body picture. And to make this, he used his normal method, however, where he made a grid. He took a photo, he made a grid, and painted within each square in the grid to make a fully formed piece. Now, this isn't the typical way of doing it, but this is how photorealists do it. So when you go up and you look really close at the painting, it's not going to look that good because it's just a bunch of squares painted different shades, different colors. This piece is grayscale, so it's just different shades. But when you step back and let your eyes see the whole picture, then you could make out a full body that is actually very precise compared to the picture. However, yeah, when you go close, it's going to just look like a bunch of squares. So he put this out, and his work was actually first in a museum in 1969. And that work was a picture I had up previously, which is Big Self-Portrait. Now, this is actually him. This is Chuck Close right here. He obviously had a great deal in choosing what he wanted to show to people. So he chose to have the cigarette in his glasses. And that's a form of self-expression right there. And so, yeah, that was his first work that was actually in the museum. It was in the Walker Art Museum. And when it got put in the museum, his style of art had a ripple effect within art culture. So typically at the time, photos were not seen as art. They were just seen as photos. So when he started doing these photorealistic paintings, they became an art form. So that's how photos really, or photography really crept into the art world. So he did that, or this happened because Chuck Close's photographs had a function. They had a function of art. So their function of art was for persuasion and self-expression. So like I said, he had his cigarette in, he had his glasses on. He's showing people what he wants them to see. He has his shirt off, looking all cool right there. So that's his self expression. And his function of persuasion is that that photos are an art form. And he did this, like how I said, he gave his photos a function. And yeah. So his early work, which is what I mostly went over with the big nude and big self portrait, preceded an era of what Close's art was to be about after he became paralyzed. So he became paralyzed with chest pains, and he that was really like a turning point in his life. He saw it as such a significant uh, time that he called it the event. So the event that really changed his life, that was it. So he had to rehabilitate and go through physical therapy after the event. And actually, his wife wanted the physical therapist to implement painting into his physical therapy. So, in that way, painting really helped him strengthen his arms back up so he could move them around and get back to where he wanted to be. And yeah, so moving on, his first piece after the event was called Alex 2. And the piece was much smaller, had a much sadder feel to it. It was smaller because he couldn't move around as much. The sad feel was because of his feeling about how he was feeling at the time, because of the injury and the impairment, and everything wasn't really going right. So he put that into his work. It represented his conflicted emotions at the time. And that piece, along with many others, focused more on illusionistic imagery. So here I'll bring a piece up right here. So this is more illusionistic imagery. This is a piece that he did after his impairment. And as you can see, there are a lot of shapes in there that you don't usually see directly on a face when you're looking at a picture. So let's look at Big Self Portrait again. As you can see, this is really precise, and there are a lot of details. You can see the cigarette, the smoke coming off. There's a lot of details here. Now you're looking at this one after his impairment, and it's really like it has a lot of ovals in there, a lot of oblong shapes that form. You see his teeth here, usually regular and rigid and square. They form like a rectangular oblong shape. And this is really to imply a face. There's not really a face here. It's just a bunch of shapes that, as we step back from it, we can see a face. So he uses like a few elements that he uses. He uses line in there. As you can see, like the bridge of his glasses right here. He uses this line to form an oval right here. And if it weren't for our eyes, it would just be an oval. But now we can see, oh, that's the bridge of his glasses right there. And as you can see, the eyes, they're just ovals. They're different shapes, different colors. So it's really implying a face that isn't really there, but our eyes can see it. Another element is that he uses these squares. You see these grids right here. There are grids all throughout the piece. And he just paints within these squares, and that really gives him the ability to work in his own way. So he sees it in a very analytical way, goes square by square in painting, and that allows him to do it in his own way and be creative in that way. All right, thank you for listening very much. Bye bye.